Exiting the Civil Affairs Bureau, Zhao Qi looked at me with anger and said, "Jing Fenghe, why are you so petty? You want a divorce over such a small matter?" I looked at the man in front of me without any emotion on my face and calmly replied, "It's because I'm not petty that I endured until now, and that's why I'm divorcing you." With that, I walked away, but my tears betrayed my composure. The twisted fate between Zhao Qi and me dates back to 9 years ago. At that time, I had just graduated from university, secured a job in the city where I studied, and was ready to settle down. However, my parents didn't want me to be too far from home and hoped I would find a job locally. My second aunt called and said, "Little he, your parents worked hard to raise you. You can't be so selfish, always thinking about your own happiness without considering your parents. Although you were adopted, after your parents had their biological child, they cherished you just as much. People in our village now say your parents raised you in vain. You know the saying, you can't feed mutton to a dog, an adopted child is like an ungrateful wolf." My second aunt's words left me silent. Yes, I was an adopted child. When I was 6, I went to a friend's house with my cousin. The friend's mother looked at me and said, "This child was so tiny when she was adopted. Now she's grown so much. Do you miss your real parents?" I didn't quite understand what she meant, so I went home and told my mom. The usually gentle mother took me to my cousin's friend's house and had a quarrel with her mother. The friend's mother, as if ready to devour me, pointed at me and said, "I knew you were adopted. How dare this child speak so rudely?" I was frightened and dared not say a word. After that incident, the fact that I was adopted became an open secret. However, my parents treated me well. Even when my brother was born when I was 8, they continued to dote on me despite the financial difficulties caused by the hefty fine imposed on our family. During our poorest times, we survived on 100 yuan a month. Mom would often hug me and my brother, saying, "In the future, you two sisters will be each other's family. So, you must love and care for each other." In fact, everyone opposed my pursuit of higher education except my parents. My brother's birth brought a substantial fine to our family. At the poorest moment, we lived on 100 yuan a month. However, my parents persevered, and they managed to support me through high school and university. They borrowed money from almost all our relatives to cover my tuition. I still remember the year I got into university. Relatives advised my parents to save money for my brother, with my second aunt being the loudest, saying, "Daughter-in-law is an outsider, sooner or later, she'll leave. Moreover, little he is adopted. Big brother, if you're smart, you'll leave the money for your son." I was afraid my parents would heed my second aunt's advice. But my mom hugged me and said, "I suffered because I lacked education. My daughter got into university, even if we have to sell the pot and the pan, I will support her." Thinking about this, I felt it was time to return to my parents. So, I went back to them. Returning to the small village with limited opportunities, my parents were delighted, but concerns about my job arose. At this moment, my second aunt visited and suggested to my parents, "Big brother, sister-in-law, I have a young man in mind. His family is in the county town, all 3 of them hold official positions, and they even have a daughter attending university. The Zhao family is looking for a cultured daughter-in-law, and it just happens to match our little he." Finally, my second aunt emphasized that once I marry into their family, they would arrange a job for me. My parents were intrigued. Although I wasn't eager to start a relationship so soon, I followed my parents' wishes and met Zhao Qi. I must admit, Zhao Qi's charming face could captivate a group of young girls, including me. So, I ended up in a relationship with Zhao Qi in a daze. Although the prospective in-laws looked down on my parents for being farmers without a pension, they reluctantly agreed to meet them. The first time my parents met Zhao Qi's family, the mother-in-law condescendingly said to my parents, "Little he's parents, this restaurant is the best in the county town. You won't get another chance like this in your lifetime. Make the most of it. Oh, by the way, you uncultured farmers always like to take leftovers home, eating other people's saliva. Zhao Qi, eat less, and save the rest for little he's parents." I was furious. Without finishing the meal, I told Zhao Qi we were breaking up and left with my parents. Upon learning this, my second aunt rushed to my house that afternoon. While persuading my parents, she argued that for the sake of my daughter's happiness, enduring a little discomfort was nothing. She also mentioned the excellent conditions in Zhao's family, with prospective in-laws helping plan my future development. They even paved the way for me to secure a teaching position. In the future, after my brother graduated from university, he might also benefit from the Zhao family. My parents, considering my aunt's advice, thought that enduring some discomfort for their daughter's happiness was worth it. Zhao Qi sincerely apologized to me. So, we reconciled, and the wedding was put on the agenda. During the wedding negotiations, following our local customs, the prospective in-laws agreed to a dowry of 100,000, plus 3 pieces of gold. My parents, thinking highly of my in-laws' generosity, gave me 80,000 as a dowry. Over the years, with no savings due to supporting my education and my brother's, my parents had to borrow money even for my wedding. So, I asked my parents to keep the dowry for me, and I left my in-laws' dowry card with them. Soon, Zhao Qi and I held our wedding. After marriage, my mother-in-law didn't trouble me, although she often claimed to be a hardworking person. She didn't even ask me to cook when I entered the house. However, her cooking was terrible. So, during the 3rd visit to my in-laws, I went straight to the kitchen with my mother after entering the house. After the meal, my mother took me to a separate room, handed me a bank card, and said, "I know you care about your dad and me working hard for money. According to custom, the dowry is your private money, and you can leave it at your parents' home. But this dowry, you have to handle it yourself. Living as a couple requires money for daily necessities. Besides, even if you don't want it, Zhao Qi would feel uncomfortable knowing about it. This card is the dowry money from your mother-in-law. Your dad and I haven't touched the money inside." Mom was firm in her stance, so I reluctantly accepted the bank card. In the afternoon, my brother had to return to school for classes. Since Zhao Qi had been drinking at lunch, I asked him to rest at home while I drove my brother back to school. On the way back, we passed by the bank. I decided to check the balance and transfer some money to my account. However, seeing only 10 yuan in the bank card left me stunned. Suppressing my anger, I trembled as I took a photo of the screen and then drove back to my parents' home. Back home, I handed my phone to Zhao Qi and said, "I never expected your family to play such a trick on me. If you didn't want to give the dowry, you could have just said it." But Zhao Qi, reeking of alcohol, replied, "This card was at your parents' home for a few days. Who knows if they took the money?" I couldn't help but laugh in exasperation and pointed at Zhao Qi, saying, "My parents wouldn't use the money inside, and even if they did, there would be a transaction record. Since the bank card was given to me, there hasn't been a single transaction record." Unable to hide the truth, Zhao Qi played the rogue and said, "Arranging jobs and connections requires money. Even your cousin, your second aunt's son, needs money for job arrangements. Initially, your second aunt tried to introduce your cousin to me for a job. I didn't fancy that worthless woman, and only after she introduced you, promising that you were a virgin, did I agree to meet you. Otherwise, with my family's conditions, many women wanted to marry me. Why would it be you?" I was on the verge of exploding in anger, and all my doubts were instantly clarified. I had wondered why my second aunt suddenly changed her attitude. With Zhao Qi's family being so well off, why didn't she leave him for my cousin? It was only after marrying Zhao Qi that I discovered my cousin, who didn't even finish middle school, was Zhao Qi's father's driver. Furthermore, less than a week after meeting Zhao Qi, he eagerly suggested taking me out. Our first time happened during that outing. Afterward, Zhao Qi excitedly said, "I've hit the jackpot, my wife is the real deal." I shouted at Zhao Qi, "Let's get divorced tomorrow." Angry, Zhao Qi retorted, "Fine, let's get divorced. You're a pregnant woman now, let's see who would want you." With that, he angrily walked away. After explaining the situation to my parents, my father sighed, deeply inhaling from his cigarette. My mother advised me, "You're already married, you can't just divorce like that. Once a woman has a second marriage, her reputation is tarnished. Besides, the money for arranging your job should come from our family. Your father and I don't have the capability, so consider this dowry money spent." I cried bitterly in my mother's arms. The next day, sobered-up Zhao Qi came to my parents' house and took me back. However, from then on, he no longer pretended. My in-laws, upon learning about my pregnancy, helped me apply for an extended leave from school. While I was at home during my pregnancy, Zhao Qi often stayed out overnight. Every time he returned, there would be different women's perfume on him. He avoided involvement in household matters altogether. My mother-in-law was especially guarded against me. During my pregnancy, my mother-in-law claimed my parents were greedy for money and confiscated Zhao Qi's salary card. She only paid for my prenatal checkups, the baby's diapers and formula, while I had to buy household items. After our daughter was born, my mother-in-law, favoring her grandson over my daughter, not only refused to look at her but also criticized my mother, calling her lazy and insisting she come to take care of my child. Since my mom was not in good health, I had to take a long leave from school. During this time, I suggested divorce to Zhaoqi twice, but he believed I was a pushover since I endured the dowry issue and thought I wouldn't actually divorce him. Every time I brought up divorce, he threatened me with the custody of our daughter and used my cousin's job and my second aunt's situation to intimidate me. Then, my second aunt would come to my house, acting pitifully and throwing a tantrum, trying to prevent me from divorcing Zhaoqi. When my daughter was 2.5 years old, I enrolled her in a nursery and returned to work. However, shortly after I started working, my younger sister-in-law became pregnant. Unexpectedly, my mother-in-law suggested that I resign to take care of my sister-in-law full-time. She even said that since I was a teacher, I could help take care of my sister-in-law's child after it was born. I refused, but my father-in-law secretly arranged a long leave for me at school. So, I began a cold war with Zhaoqi. But little did I expect that my 3-year-old daughter would hug my leg and say, "Mom, don't divorce Dad. Grandma said if you divorce Dad, she will hide me, and I don't want to be away from you." I knew that Zhaoqi and his family, abusing their power, not only looked down on me but also employed extremely disgusting tactics. Therefore, I reluctantly became a free babysitter for my younger sister-in-law. However, I knew Zhaoqi wasn't going to stay quiet. In order to divorce him, I secretly observed his every move. I knew Zhaoqi wanted an external banner to flutter while keeping the family red flag intact. It was more appropriate for me, a red flag that could be easily controlled. Under my patience, 6 months ago, I finally found an opportunity. This woman is named Chen Chen. After she got together with Zhaoqi, she added me on WeChat and often sent me intimate photos of her and Zhaoqi. I pretended to be a weak wife desperate to save her marriage and met Chen Chen twice. The purpose was to make her drop her guard against me. Later on, I even revealed to Chen Chen my mother-in-law's preference for boys over girls, implying that as long as she conceived a boy, she could rise in status. Furthermore, I kindly pleaded with Chen Chen, asking her to let me take away my daughter. I even offered to leave with nothing, as long as she didn't become a stepmother. Chen Chen was very cooperative and soon became pregnant. Holding the pregnancy test report, she confidently declared, "I'm carrying a boy." As a result, my mother-in-law urged Zhaoqi and me to divorce. However, although Zhaoqi was despicable, he didn't want to divorce me. In his eyes, any random woman, even if pregnant with a son, wouldn't be well-behaved if brought into the family. In the end, with the efforts of my mother-in-law and Chen Chen, Zhaoqi had no choice but to divorce me. As I left the Civil Affairs Bureau, Zhaoqi still angrily said, "Jing Fenghe, why are you so petty? Divorcing me over such a small matter?" I found it amusing how this man, with his twisted logic, could still be surprised. Clearly, I had long wanted to part ways with him. Our status as a resentful couple had been established when the bank card balance was exposed. Thinking of this, I calmly replied, "It's because I don't hold grudges that I endured until now, and that's why I'm divorcing you." At that moment, my daughter ran over and said, "Mom, let's go home." I lifted my daughter, looked at my parents and brother, and smiled, saying, "Yes, we're going home." However, in that fleeting moment, tears fell from my eyes. Yet, I knew those were tears of joy for a new beginning.